So, the common theme that I found here, as I said, I wanted to listen to everybody's words and see what the theme was. And it just so happens that it's the very same thing that I wanted to talk about today, which is beautiful. So, it's this idea of basically discipline. And this is the thing that's been coming up in my life and in the work that I do with other people so much lately. And that's why I want to bring it in, because what I've been finding is that rife in the spiritual world, you often find teachers and people that say something along the lines of follow your highest joy and just go for what feels good and just act on whatever your highest joy is, act on whatever feels good to you. So, personally, in my experience, that hasn't been my path. I'm not doubting that path, and I'm not saying that that's not the way to go. But what I would say about it is that discipline is needed to basically balance that out. And it always comes kind of back to this idea of the balance of the masculine and the feminine, whereas the feminine represents the flow and the creation and the inspiration, whereas the masculine represents the order and the structure and the routine and all those things. So, in my personal experience, when developing my own intuition, I found that it was necessary for me to question everything I see and feel. So I'm at a point now in my life where I feel a lot more comfortable following the signs. If something like, if I see 222 on the clock when I'm wondering, should I go there? And then I'll be like, okay, that's confirmation I should go there. So there's these things that come up more and more and more as I live my life. And I feel more comfortable following those signs and those symbols because I've done the work to ask about my intuition. Because if we are just only following our highest joy, that isn't to say that you won't get to your freedom, because every path leads home. That's the truth that trumps all of the paths anyways, is that no matter which way you go, you could go be a heroin addict, you're still going to end up at God at some point. It doesn't matter which way you go. You could do all the wrong things, because there's no wrong things, and you could end up still back home in heaven with God at some point. That's just the way it is. But it depends on what you want. What kind of path do you want to live? Because if you just only follow your highest joy, if you only follow that which is your impulse without question, like it just comes in like, oh, I've got a sign to say that, or I got an impulse to do that, so I'm just going to listen to it and go for it. That can be really helpful. But what it does is bring you to the medicine that you need. And sometimes that medicine might be something really difficult to swallow. So you might end up on this path that is really extreme highs and really extreme lows. And that is a way to come back to that space within yourself. But if you want to be in control of your path and not have the extreme downs as well as the extreme highs, and you would rather have that level of peace that many of you mentioned, is just more of just a steady, slight up and down as you move through the field. If you focus on, if that's your desire, finding that way of being, then it requires discipline. And that's where you bring in your will. What you want to do is really focus on, what am I doing, and is it for my highest good? Is it really truly what I know to be good? So if we only listen to our impulses might tell us to go get KFC every day because that's an impulse. But that's where the discipline comes in, and that's where the analysis comes in. You have to ask yourself the question, where does this impulse come from? Because our intuition, while we're doing the work, is intricately tied up to our addictions and our fears and our attachments. So it's hard to tell, is this my actual intuition, or is this something that is an addiction manifesting itself? Or is it a core wound that hasn't been reconciled, so it needs some sort of satisfaction in order to give me what I'm looking for? So this is just one of many examples of the ways in which our core wounds, our attachments, and our fears can lead us to impulses and signs and symbols that will bring us what we think we want, but then it ends up causing a lot of harm in us. But then we end up learning anyways. So the point either way is that you'll always end up going on the path you need to go on. but you can choose what kind of path do I want. Do I want an up and down path that has extreme highs and extreme lows? Do I want a still path that's nice and calm and slow and there's not a lot of bumps? Do you want to go fast? Do you want to get to liberation tomorrow, or do you want to get to liberation over time in a comfortable way? So these are important questions to ask yourself when you're honing your intuition. And the more you dedicate yourself to the spiritual path, which is essentially letting go of your attachments and letting go of your fears, the more you do that, the more honed and refined your intuition becomes. And then you can trust it more and more and more. So for my own example, I practice this all the time. Whenever I get an impulse, I ask myself, is that really serving me? Or is that an addiction? Am I really just wanting that thing because I think it will give me some feeling that I want? And if the answer is yes, I'm like, well, why do I need that feeling? Do I not have enough with just myself? Am I looking for something outside of myself to satisfy myself? And then I find out a lot of the times that those impulses are just a reflection of some strong desire I have because I let myself get caught in the desire and fear world too intricately. So it's important to witness that. It's important to always be analyzing your intentions and the things that you choose to do in your life and the signs that come in. And then the more you do that, the more you don't have to do that. The more you give your attention to, should I do that? Is this right? Does it serve me? Is it for my highest good? Is it in alignment with all the other knowledge I've obtained throughout my life? And if you continue to have that practice of asking those questions, then you will find your fears, you will find your attachments, and you will work through them. And then when an impulse comes through that tells you to follow this thing, you'll be able to know that's actually in alignment with my highest good. It's not an addiction because I know the difference. But in order to know that difference, you have to practice questioning and analyzing and witnessing, most of all, just witnessing the way your mind works and the things that come through, whether it's I really want that thing or I'm really afraid of that thing. Sometimes you might have to go towards a fear, and sometimes you might have to turn away from a desire. So it's a really important balance to find. It's the skill, and that's where your will comes in. Okay, well, right away, there's never any real well, I won't say there's never, but I think in your position, there's no real benefit to shaming yourself or guilting yourself over this. And I know it's an impulse. That's an impulse as well. It's kind of an automatic thing. You could say, be nice to myself, but it's hard to be nice to yourself when you're not in control of how you feel or how you think, right? But what I will say to the pleasure idea is that you're right in that it is valuable to follow pleasure. We're supposed to have pleasure. Like we wouldn't be programmed, not like the external programming, but as divine beings coming into this world to experience pleasure if we weren't supposed to have it. And I will say that the more you actually discipline yourself and choose your path and say, I'm going to do this rather than following only pleasure, then it actually increases your capacity for pleasure. You actually, your capacity for all feelings expands when you have control over yourself. When you are in the driver's seat and you're not just going to what feels good in that moment and just following it without question, when you come into a state of discipline where you are in control of your own life, you gain more confidence in yourself, you tap into your inner power more, and the more you tap into your inner power, the more capacity you open for your inner pleasure as well. So you're never actually having to give up pleasure permanently. It's not a permanent thing. It's just like, I'm going to sacrifice pleasure today for a slight discomfort so I can build my body better or train my mind better or whatever it is you need to do. And you just make that a regular practice. And the more you do that, I can tell you from experience, the pleasure actually expands because you have less blocks in your body. When you have less blocks in your mind, you have less blocks in your body. So if you can let go of fears and attachments in your mind, those vibrations that are being held in your consciousness, they release. And that has a cascade effect on your entire being that allows for energy to flow through you more. And then the slightest little thing can give you immense pleasure. Just walking outside and shaking hands with a tree can be incredibly enjoyable. Just holding hands with somebody that you're attracted to can be better than sex sometimes because of how connected you are to yourself. but we get addicted to the maximum pleasure because we're in such pain that we need relief from the pain. But if you practice going into your pain and dealing with your pain and making friends with your pain on a daily basis, then it opens up more space for pleasure in an entirely more immense way than you've ever experienced. So you never actually have to give up anything. You don't have to be a renunciant for the rest of your life. You just have to prove to yourself that you can do it. And in doing so, you allow yourself to expand your body and expand the space in your body and in your soul. So those waves of pleasure have a far more powerful effect on your whole being.
Drop the mic, dude. Good.